I call Claire Curran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, it's a privilege to be the final speaker in this this debate on the Privileges Committee report. I was on the what is now being known as the Twitter debate. I was the interloper on the Privileges Committee, and I'm very proud to have had the opportunity to do that, and probably would describe myself as being on the more radical end of the spectrum amongst my colleagues with my views around the use of social media, but certainly not radical when it comes to the wider public and the wider public's use of social media. And I will expound upon that a little bit during my contribution tonight. The conclusion of I don't think there's too much point in going over too much of the detail because that's been well canvassed by other erudite speakers, but the conclusion basically of this report was to use your common sense when tweeting, Facebooking or Instagramming or whatever else you're doing on social media, but don't forget that you're an MP and can be held accountable. And also that rights to free speech will be upheld, just don't take pictures in the House unless you're in the gallery with permission, and use your good judgment. Thankfully, parody and satire is now okay again. So this debate, this inquiry came about because of this thing called Twitter, and it's an inquiry, it's called an inquiry into social media, but actually, in my contention, Mr. Speaker, it is about Twitter because of the particular nature of that social media interface. And just to bring everyone back to the reason for this debate is that it actually was a tweet from one of the colleagues, one of my Labour colleagues, Trevor Mallard, criticising a decision by the Speaker in May last year. And I won't read out the tweet, but the tweet was sufficient enough to draw the attention of the Leader of the House and it wasn't the first time, I think, where there'd been a discussion about the character of particular tweets. I know certain numbers of my own tweets had been called into question by members across the House, and there was a certain inevitability to the fact that there would eventually be some kind of inquiry, and it's certainly not a precedent. There have been inquiries in other jurisdictions, and the Privileges Committee took advantage of that and sought the advice from these other jurisdictions and ultimately came to the right conclusion in the main, in my contention. So I just want to touch on just how important is this social media thing, and just have a look at just the use of social media amongst the House. I think one of the speakers in the debate actually referred to there being 105 members who use Twitter. I'm reliably informed today by that recorder of political minutiae, Phil Life, that 106 have Twitter accounts, that over in most months there would be around 90 actually actively tweeting. There are 15 members who don't have accounts at all. And in terms of Facebook, that another watcher of political activity, Ashley Murchison, has recorded 117 of our 121 listed on Facebook, and I think what that tells us is that social media and the use of social media is not a fad. And if you look at the New Zealand statistics from last year, 89% of New Zealanders are online. 55% of us use Facebook, which is around 2.2 million, and 370,000, more than 370,000 of us are on Twitter. So I think this debate and this report has to be taken in that context, that New Zealanders use social media a lot, and that it's a tool, a particular tool of communication, and it's important, therefore, that the Parliament take that seriously. Just in relation to the report, Mr. Speaker, I think that we were aided very admirably by the submissions. There were 14 submissions, particularly by the submission by the former Clerk of the House, Mary Harris, who gave very good guidance to the committee and just very briefly said that her view was that the use of social media had not changed the essential nature of the issues that the rule of the House had evolved to deal with, and that advances in technology offered a huge opportunity to engage New Zealanders with Parliament as never before. And for both those reasons, she said that restriction or regulation should be avoided and should be dealt with by recourse to the existing rules of the House. Now that, and if they weren't, then that we would be placing ourselves at risk of appearing to be out of touch with the modern world. I absolutely concur with that view, and think that we should have, in my humble opinion, we should have taken that view to include the use of photographs as well, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But ultimately, what the conclusion was, and it was the right conclusion, was that we already have rules in the House. We've got Standing Order 410(0), which is the standing order which applies. It's just that the mediums that we're using are different. So the rules are right, and they've withstood this test of time, and they will continue to stand the test of time. And I think that shows the robustness of our parliamentary processes, our rules, and the thought that's gone into them. And it doesn't matter what comes next in terms of technology, that those rules should be adhered to. And so I think basically the committee worked that out quite quickly. Where we did have the debate was around the role of the media and their rights, and relaxing that rule on satire. I agree with what Gareth Hughes said around that it's an out-of-date rule, and it's anything that actually penalises satire and parody is not the mark of a good democracy, and so I think that's pretty important. Where I do differ is in the use of photographs, and I believe that a sensible approach to this would have been to allow a more minimalist use of taking photographs where people gave their permission, and I believe that just as is demonstrated out there in the community, people do have the capacity to moderate behaviour online when it's clearly not appropriate, that there are rules that are in place, and I think that we will at some point revise the decision that's been made on that. I am pleased that we have, as I said, relaxed the rules on satire. I think we've clarified the ability for the gallery to take photos and filming, and I think again I'd like to commend the submission that the president of the chair of the press gallery, Claire Trevette, made, which was a very useful contribution. But ultimately, I believe that it's a sticking your finger in the dike approach to saying that using photographs by members in the House is not acceptable, and I do believe that we will at some point come back and revise that decision. I think that I think if we are to be a truly modern parliament, if we are to reflect the use of technology and how at its most beneficial and effective that the public want to see and want to engage more directly with MPs. And I'll refer also to a group of parliamentarians called the Parliamentary Internet Forum, myself, Gareth Hughes, Nikki Kay and Tracy Martin, which was kicked off in 2010, which really did try to provide a way of more open government and more accessibility to Parliament using social media and technology.
Members, the question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Call on private and local order of the day number 1.
Wellington.